Tonight, deal or no deal? Donald Trump threatens to obliterate Iran's energy plants if they don't agree to a ceasefire. The White House insists talks are progressing despite what it calls public posturing from Iran. But Tehran says no, dismissing the US president's demands as unrealistic, illogical and excessive. And war in the Middle East becomes an economic crisis for the world. Donald Trump's threats drove the price of oil to more than $116 a barrel today. In the next hour, we'll look at the diplomatic and military options available to the White House in the face of Iran's defiance. Also ahead, a British woman detained in Iran tells Sky News she's made her peace with death. And just 2 days to go and counting, why NASA is going back to the moon. Hello, a very good evening. US President Donald Trump said today he wants a deal with Iran or he'll obliterate their oil wells and their power and desalination plants. Deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure could be a potential war crime. But he's backing up his threat with thousands of US Marines and the 82nd Airborne Unit of the US Army, an elite unit with a storied history. All this has led to growing chatter in Washington about what happens next. The White House insists that talks are progressing.
These folks are appearing more reasonable behind the scenes privately in these conversations than perhaps some of the previous leaders who are now no longer on planet Earth because they lied to the United States and they strung us along in negotiations, and that was unacceptable to the president, which is why many of the previous leaders were killed. So again, this is another historic opportunity for Iran to do the right thing, to rid themselves of their nuclear ambitions and to come to a deal with this president and the administration.
But Iran has dismissed Trump's proposals as unrealistic, illogical and excessive, and even says they would welcome American boots on the ground. The Speaker of Parliament boasted our men are waiting for American soldiers so we can set fire to their souls. Well, this war has never been popular in America, but until now, the greatest impact on the average voter has been at the petrol pump, with prices up almost a third in the past month. Imagine how people in Delaware or Detroit will feel if they're confronted with daily images of American soldiers being flown home in coffins. The White House say they have the military might to take Karg Island or any other Iranian target, but it is the political will to stay there for what could be months and years they may well need. Well, let's bring in our US correspondent, David Blevins, who's in Washington for us. David, what do you make of these seemingly contradictory statements then by the president?
Well, this week has begun the way last week ended, with a series of contradictory statements. The president talking about them making great progress while at the same time threatening to obliterate key sites in Iran. I think the most telling aspect of his most recent post on Truth Social is that threat to target oil, electricity and water plants. That is civilian infrastructure, and targeting it would normally be considered a breach of international law. But when his press secretary, Caroline Levitt, was asked about that today, about the potential for a war crime being committed, she simply said that the US always operates within the confines of the law. Of course, many would dispute that, but that the president would move forward in pursuit of his objectives unabated. That little word "but" is a significant pivot in the middle of that sentence. Now, in terms of the other contradictions, the president is talking about a new and more reasonable regime he's dealing with. In an interview with the New York Post, he appears to have revealed that the contact is indeed the Speaker of Iran's parliament. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio, on the other hand, is telling US networks that there are fractures in the leadership in Iran, that there is dissent there to the point where some of the people they're talking to may now be at risk. If that's the case, you've got to ask how credible any deal would be. And of course, the other contradiction is the president claims they're making this enormous progress, while Iran says it's rejected the 15-point plan as unreasonable. So clearly much work to be done in the days ahead if they're to prevent the possibility of troops being on the ground.
OK, David in Washington, thank you very much. Well, let's get more on the politics of all of this. John Feiner was a national security advisor to President Joe Biden and co-hosts a foreign affairs podcast called The Long Game.
The president is sort of barreling ahead on two separate and I think mutually exclusive tracks. One, a diplomatic track where he is trying to get into a serious conversation with the Iranians about ending the war, maybe hosted by the Pakistanis. And then the other, a massive increase in military footprint with the goal towards possibly a ground incursion of some kind into Iran, either on one of the islands or perhaps to go after the nuclear material, or perhaps a naval operation to open up the strait. And the reality is, I don't think the administration has made a decision about what it wants to do and what it's going to do. So we all look into our crystal balls and try to kind of read tea leaves. But at the end of the day, when they haven't decided, it's hard for anybody else to know either.
Yeah, I mean, you spent many years negotiating the Iranian nuclear deal before Donald Trump walked away in 2017. It does feel, doesn't it, that to save face, Donald Trump needs to achieve something that is bigger than that. What could it be, and is it achievable?
I mean, what's strange about the question, which is a perfectly valid question, is that he was trying to negotiate before this war started a version of the exact deal that he pulled out of in 2018 that would have reduced Iran's ability to enrich uranium and locked up the nuclear program for a decade or more. And by the way, if that deal were still in place, which we all know it's ancient history, Iran would have been under international monitoring through 2031 to ensure that they were not going to pursue a nuclear weapon many years into the future. And instead, we're now at war. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be hard for him to achieve that because military action can only delay the program. It cannot stop it permanently. Iran has the know-how to enrich uranium and ultimately, if it decides to produce a weapon. And what I'm worried about is that having pulled out of the deal and then having gone to war, he is teaching the Iranians what I think is a dangerous lesson, which is that unless you have a nuclear weapon, you are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks.
Yeah, so I suppose it does beg the question, doesn't it? You've touched on this already. If the talks fail, and Marco Rubio has suggested that that is always going to be a possibility, then there are two options left, aren't there? One, as you've mentioned, boots on the ground, which is something many people in America do not want to see. And then there's another option for Donald Trump to walk away and say, look, the Strait of Hormuz is no longer our problem, it's Europe's problem. We don't need it for our oil. Get on with it yourself.
So yes, there is this weird idiosyncrasy that America does not actually export oil through the Strait of Hormuz. So I guess on some level, maybe the president could claim this is somebody else's problem. Maybe the buyers, the Indians, the Chinese, the countries that buy most of the energy that comes through the Strait should be working with Iran to figure this out. But the problem with that argument is that it is a global energy market. It is a global oil market. And when the prices spike, as they have now, you know, north of $100 a barrel and probably headed significantly higher, given this massive supply disruption, that is going to impact American consumers as well and American buyers of gasoline at the pump, which is a political challenge for any administration. I lived through this in a White House that faced higher gas prices. This president says he is focused on reducing prices and bringing affordability back to America. And this is going to undermine that agenda, even if it's not American exports that go through the Strait.
How much pain can Americans take? They can take a bit of pain at the petrol pump, can't they? But can they stomach seeing American soldiers coming home in coffins?
Yeah, look, I think if you're the Iranians, what you're thinking now is we have faced America's largest blow, or one of the largest blows America can inflict on us, which is you have taken out our leader. You have taken out the top echelons of our government. You have bombed our country now for weeks on end. And yes, the United States could go in on the ground, but at this point, Iran has suffered quite a bit in the course of this conflict. And there has been some success by the United States. It has degraded Iran's military capability. But for the United States, the level of pain that could be coming could increase significantly.
And John, just a final question about President Trump and his advisors. Do you think he is now surrounded just by people who will agree with him? Is he just surrounded by yes men?
So I think there are two problems. One, it's quite clear that very few people want to give the president bad news. There have been these reports that he gets a kind of highlight reel of what's happening in the war every morning by video, the things that we've blown up with our bombs, but not really a strategic briefing about whether our objectives in the conflict are being met. When the Trump administration negotiates, it's a couple people close to the president who lack any of this expertise, locked in a room with some counterparts. And the risk is they miss things. They don't fully understand the text and the implications of what they're negotiating. And by the way, that's not an indictment of them. Nobody could understand all of these details without experts who have spent their whole careers working on these things. And those people no longer work in the US government because this administration decided they weren't necessary.
John Finer speaking to me a little bit earlier. So what are America's options if they do decide to try and reopen the Strait of Hormuz by force? Military historian and analyst Victoria Taylor has been taking a look.
It's day 31 of the war in Iran. And at the moment, of course, we've been looking at the intensification of strikes on both sides. But all eyes, all attention are on the Strait of Hormuz. This is the point at which you're seeing the rise in oil prices. This is the cause, this is the bottleneck. And when we look at this region, we are seeing in the fact that, of course, there have been the reports of Iranian mines put in the area. This can make it incredibly dangerous for any shipping that is coming through. But it's Karg Island over here that's had most of the attention. And that's because ultimately 90% of Iran's crude oil exports passes through the island before they move forward. It's also strategically very important to the Americans because if they could potentially have control of it or perhaps even take it, then they are cutting off a lifeline for Iran's Revolutionary Guards as well. But what's actually the possibility with Karg? What would the Americans need to do to gain influence over it? Well, we've seen a little bit of debate over this. A possibility, of course, is that we will see an amphibious landing. So this, of course, could allow for different troops to be coming in. This is when we get our SEALs. This is when we get our Marines and, of course, Rangers. All of these different special forces coming in order to take the island by force. They, of course, could be supported by airborne troops in order to make way and to seize control from the island, a kind of shock and awe tactic from all directions. They've got to be careful, of course, to not bomb it too intensely in case they need to use the airstrip and they need to use different areas here. And this is partially why that they've left the southern part of the island relatively free from airstrikes. That is where the oil infrastructure is. It's a point at which the Americans can have that sort of leverage. And so ultimately, this is something that could be incredibly dangerous for the Americans to attempt. Another possibility, of course, is that they could go for a proper blockade across the entire island and to try and gain control that way. Another problem, of course, is that Karg isn't the only potential invasion target for the Americans. Iran has got a multitude of islands that are all strategically significant. And if you're trying to bring something through the Strait of Hormuz, you're having to deal with all of these other islands that could prove threats. They could be launching missiles, drones, fast boats, all of these different options that could be incredibly dangerous to any ships passing through the strait. So would it even be worth it? Would it be worth invading the island of Karg? And could you even really hold it? Well, the Americans must know from Iraq, from Afghanistan, that it's not always necessarily the point of invasion that is the main victory. Occupation and maintaining that success is even more difficult. And it's estimated that the Americans would need at least 2,000 troops to hold each island group. This is going to get a really tiring and sort of exhausting campaign for the Americans, even if they manage to take it. This is no Venezuela.
Well, that leads us very nicely to our next guest, Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt. He was the US Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East Affairs in the Bush White House. Great to have you with us this evening. Thank you very much for your time. What's your assessment then? Do you think we will see American troops going into Iran?
First, I think you correct a number of the errors that were given to you and unchallenged by John Finer. In fact, October 2025, there will be no limitations on centrifuges, no limitations on uranium enrichment, all use material purpose, and no monitoring the ballistic missile program. So any suggestion that John had that the JCPOA went out to 2031 is just contradicted by the facts.
And in terms of boots on the ground?
Okay, well, first of all, I saw the wonderful briefing that was just given on Card Island. I think probably the major option, which was not presented by Dr. Taylor, was the easiest of all, which is just cut off the electrical supply to the pumps pumping oil into the tankers. That's easy, either done by bombing or done by cyber. It's also easily reversible, which is something I think we would want to have. Somehow suggesting that putting troops on the ground and making them liable to bombardment, which could also take care of the terminal, it could wipe out the terminal itself, doesn't seem to me to be the right way to do this.
So you're saying that Carg Island could potentially be taken by America without the necessity of Americans moving in, boots on the ground. What about keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and free-flowing once again? Would that require troops along the coastline?
Well, first of all, I'd say it wouldn't be potentially, it would be easily taking care of a Carg Island without putting boots on the ground. Strait of Hormuz is a little bit of a different problem, and I think it's one that's readily resolvable. We did that in 1981 to 1988 by reflagging Kuwaiti tankers and taking them through the strait. But at that time, the United States was not a belligerent in the war, so that's why it was successful. Unfortunately, now the United States is a belligerent in the war, so the common feeling in the United States is that let's bring some non-belligerents in to escorting their tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, who have the capability for counter-mine operations. That, of course, is the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and China. So it seemed to me that because, regardless of what Dr. Feiner said, there is a relatively solvable military solution that I think the militaries of France, Germany, et al. Would be more than happy to execute, but it's a political decision primarily because of animosity towards President Trump.
Yeah, so do you think, I mean, it's something that President Trump has muted, isn't it? That essentially America could walk away from that problem saying it's not our issue, it's Europe's issue. But if America can't keep the strait open, how can Europe?
Well, two things. Number one, we're not walking away. There would be no doubt that we'd be providing intelligence, we'd be providing many assets to support that. And as I said earlier, the United States is a belligerent in this war. That makes our ships targets. If Iran wants to bring France, China, the United Kingdom in the war, then they would fire on your ships. I don't think they would want to do that, which tells me that that's a reasonable solution so as to not drag the Europeans into the war as well.
Yeah, but I suppose many will say, well, many European countries certainly didn't want this war in the first place. It's been forced upon them. Why should they be left cleaning up the mess and having to deal with it once America has decided that it's had enough?
Remarkably, that was the same reasons that the United States came into the First World War and then the Second World War. We didn't start them. We didn't want to be in them. We were persuaded by our friends and our allies to come in, and I think the world was better because of it.
They came into the Second World War when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
That's not correct. They came into the Second World War when Germany declared war on them 5 months later.
You were head planner at CENTCOM. Do you think the president is listening to his military advisors right now? Do you think he is taking on board what they're saying when it comes potentially to a huge decision about sending in American troops?
Well, I certainly haven't been part of those discussions. I've been enormously impressed with General Kane. You can't argue that this has been the most brilliant strategic bombing campaign simply by the fact that we've had no aircraft shot down and we've had no prisoners or pilots taken captive or killed. Now, Whether he is listening in the same way towards the ground invasion, we don't know because we haven't seen a ground invasion yet. Let's wait till there is a ground invasion or ground incursion before we judge whether the president has listened or not.
A thought on the situation in Israel. Can you see a situation where the USA ends its military objectives in Iran and Israel actually wants to keep up the pressure and carries on?
Certainly. I mean, our interests overlap, but they are not identical. Obviously, Israel lives under an existential threat from Iran every day. The United States is not getting attacked by missiles and drones. Israel is. So I would say that they see this problem set in a overlapping sense, as does the United States, but our national interests between the two countries are not identical.
OK. Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Israel's parliament has this evening passed a law which will make the death penalty by hanging the default punishment for West Bank Palestinians convicted of murdering Israelis. Opponents of the bill, under which executions should be carried out within 90 days of sentencing, said it's racist, draconian and unlikely to deter attacks by Palestinian militants. Far-right members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition celebrated as the bill was passed. The law has received international condemnation with a joint statement from the UK, Germany, France and Italy, saying it will significantly expand the possibilities for imposing the death penalty. You're watching The World with me, Jonathan Samuels. Still to come, protests and emergency measures as concerns grow about the global fuel supply and spiralling prices.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Rich and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Welcome back. Now, the war in the Middle East has become an economic crisis for Asia and much of the world. Around 20% of the world's oil trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran has effectively shut it off. That's why the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, was meeting energy bosses in Downing Street today. The impact is being felt hardest in Asia. The Philippines has declared a national emergency and implemented a 4-day week for civil servants. The cost of petrol and diesel there has more than doubled. While in Thailand, the government is asking people to take their jackets off as part of a campaign to save energy by turning down air conditioning. Government employees have been told to work from home. Let's go to Australia now, where 2 states have made public transport free to encourage people out of their cars, and fuel duty is being halved. Our correspondent Nicole Johnston is there in Brisbane for us. Hi, Nicole. So are these policies working?
Well, it's really too early to say, but I think a lot of it is about trying to calm people's fears, essentially, because what we've seen is people going to petrol stations across Australia and filling up not only their cars, but can after can, jerry cans full of petrol. So there's been a real panic across the country. As you said, they have removed or halved this fuel excise. That's going to make things a bit cheaper at the petrol pump. They're also in Victoria and Tasmania making public transport free. They may do that in states across the rest of the country. But people here are deeply concerned because, as you said, Australia depends on Asian refineries to get its petrol, its diesel and its jet fuel. And while we've got sort of 30 to 40 days of supply, for a country like Australia that depends on road transport to get around, a huge country, we need major semi-trailers on the road delivering food across the country, grain, agriculture, mining. All of this depends on fuel. We need jet fuel, of course, for us to get out of the country, to fly across Australia. So the government has been under a huge amount of pressure to just try and make it easier, because in Australia, like the rest of the world, people have been suffering from this cost of living crisis. Interest rates have gone up, and now with this fuel crisis on top of that, Australians have really had enough, and they're asking the government to try and do more.
Fascinating. Nicole in Brisbane for us. Thank you very much. You're watching The World with me, Jonathan Samuels. Coming up next, the British couple who've spent more than a year in prison in Iran, who have a direct message for Sir Keir Starmer.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Hello again. Now, Craig and Lindsay Foreman from East Sussex have been in prison in Iran for more than a year. The couple were on a motorbike trip around the world when they were arrested and accused of spying, which they deny. My colleague Sarah Jane spoke to them both on the phone this morning alongside their son Joe. The war has them fearing the worst, with Lindsay even saying she has made her peace with death.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Mum. How are you doing?
I'm all right, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing okay, thank you. I'm sat with Sarah Jane from Sky, and I'll let Sarah Jane say hello.
Hello, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm all right, Sarah Jane. How are you?
What's today like for you? How are you today? Because I would imagine every day is different, Lindsay.
You kind of start getting used to the noises of the various missiles and bombs that hit, and you always worry when you feel them, and the vibration. So the bunker busters have this really deep, multiple hit sound. So it's like a boom, 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 and you feel the ground beneath your feet shake. But God only knows what it's like if you're in the vicinity of them.
Lindsay, what has life been like in the prison since war broke out? Have you been treated any differently? I know Joe said that there's been a noticeable shift in the staff and the security in the prison since the start of the war.
Yeah, and it's inflamed the opinions, let's call them. So there are those that support the action, support the war, perhaps support the British, and there's those that don't, and it's bringing out the Iranian nationalism, so it's quite difficult.
Lindsay, are you referring to inmates or those staffing the prison?
Yeah. We don't see a lot of the staff now at all, so we are just in a CCTV monitored accommodation. So the guards are completely separate to us. So we wouldn't know if there were 10 guards there or 100. But from what I'm witnessing is there's a greatly reduced number of guards just by the interactions that are being had. We hear rumours that there's people that have deserted, there's people that have declined to come in because of the situation. I don't know what the truth is, but there's definitely a reduction in the number of guards and their, let's call it, seniority. It's my perception that I think there is more animosity towards the British, that being me, than there was before the war. Almost every day there is a physical fight between inmates, and I have myself been threatened, and blamed that the situation is, when they say my fault, they mean the British, because I obviously haven't created the war.
When you talk about animosity, and I'm conscious that this is a sensitive situation, you and Joe are separated by so many miles, prison walls and a war, but when you talk about animosity, are you fearful about your safety? Because there are so many pressing concerns for you. That the immediate one is, power outages, not being able to have this line of communication to your family back in the UK. But the other, of course, is the prison being hit by bombs. And you've just mentioned another one there, Lindsay. That's your own personal safety amongst the inmates. Can you talk to me about some of those fears and how it's making you feel?
So I made my peace with death within maybe 48 hours of the reality of the bombs hitting and the fact that we could be struck. Oh, I've overrun. Sorry, I've just been reminded that my time is up. I'm so sorry.
Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that I've taken time away from your conversation with Joe, but I know that you'll hopefully speak tomorrow.
I'm bringing him at 3:20.
Oh, you're going to speak to him later today.
Really lovely to speak to you, Sarah Jane, and hopefully we'll meet face to face sometime soon.
Oh, Lindsay, you take care of yourself. Thank you so much.
All right.
Speak to you later. Love you.
Take care. Speak soon.
I love you.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, God.
I mean, that's some big fears for your mum to verbalise, and big fears for you to hear about how she's feeling.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I knew this stuff happened and it goes on, but it's like heartbreaking and inspiring about how she can still be so positive and share her energy, and that's just who she is, right? That's who she's always been. She's got enough energy for herself and a million others, right? And she will always share that. But yeah, it's heartbreaking that she's in that situation, but how she can remain so positive and upbeat and hopeful, which is needed. You know, it is that we have to hold on to hope, because otherwise, you know, it will eat you alive, and it has done. It does. You know, it really does. Oh, that's Craig. Hang on. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, big dog.
Hello.
How you doing?
How are you?
I'm all right, mate. I've just. Big dog.
Big dog.
How you doing?
You all right?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just with Sarah Jane from Sky.
Craig, hi, it's Sarah Jane. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Can you sort of talk me through what's been going on there in the last 24 hours?
It's, you know, since the war, it's the tensions within the salon here have, you know, heightened, and I was snoozing earlier and got woken up by yet another fight. So the fights are becoming daily, and you know, like I just said, you know, I'm in a little bit of a downward slope at the moment.
It's so hard for you to get your head around, Craig, and you said there you felt like the tensions in the prison were escalating. There were a lot of fights. Are you feeling personally under threat at the moment?
Personally, no, but it doesn't take much to be in the middle of a fight, if that makes sense, because they are over little things. So you could just look at someone the wrong way and they will just kick off.
I would imagine the longer this war goes on for, the more you feel like you may be a target in terms of, you know, the news that we're hearing today is that Donald Trump is not ruling out boots on the ground to take a key strategic island from Iran when it comes to oil production, but then in the same breath there are talks about peace talks happening in Pakistan in the coming days. So it's still very uncertain, but just with rising anti-West sentiment in the prison, do you get the sense that that is growing and you could well be a target?
It could be. You never know. Like I say, you can't predict the war, and you can't predict what's going to happen within these wars. So, you know, we are in prison. We are 100% in prison. No one is allowed out. On
your family's behalf, what would you like to ask the Prime Minister? What would you like to say to him?
Why can't you do anything? I find it hard to believe that there is nothing that can be done. So, yeah, tell me, Mr. Keir Starmer, what exactly are you doing? Why can't you take control of this situation and free two innocent people? That's pretty much it. Just get us out of here. Because, yeah, like you say, our lives are definitely 100% at risk.
Craig, I really appreciate you answering a couple of questions. As you said, we've caught you on a bad day, and that is totally understandable. But, you know, the good news for you is, you know, Lindsay's in a buoyant mood today. She's sort of really lifted Joe as well. So, you know, it's the seesaw of emotions, and you're all here for each other and able to communicate regularly.
And Sarah Jane joins me now. Very powerful, Sarah Jane, that interview, especially hearing Lindsay say that she's made her peace with death. Quite incredible, really. And something that struck me is it felt that their demeanours were quite different in both of those phone calls.
Yeah, I described it as a seesaw of emotions, and Craig himself described it in our phone call as a roller coaster. He said he's at the dip of the roller coaster at the moment. He's not often there, but he was just having a bad day because he talked about the fact that executions had started up again in Tehran, and that was affecting, you know, cellmates, and it was really having an effect on his mood. Lindsay, by contrast, she was anticipating our phone call today, our conversation, so had sort of G'd herself up for it to put, you know, her brave face on to try and communicate her message to the outside world, not to forget her and her husband in that notorious prison in Tehran. That is in the centre of a war zone. You know, it's bad enough for them to be in prison for for something that they didn't do. They maintain that they are not spies, that, you know, it's a wrongful conviction. So it's bad enough to be sent to prison for 10 years for that, but for them to literally be in the middle of a war zone with bombs dropping around them and just wondering if one night a bomb could hit that prison. I mean, it's just unfathomable, really. But we've really got the contrast there. Lindsay having a good day today, Craig having a really bad one.
Yeah, a good day in inverted commas, of course.
Yeah.
And you've had so much reaction to the interview, Sarah Jane. The government says it is working with the family to bring the couple home safely. But you've also spoken to Richard Ratcliffe, whose wife, of course, was also held prisoner for a long time in Iran.
Yeah, Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, who spent 6 years in prison in Iran before eventually being released. It's such a high-profile case. And I spoke to Richard this evening, who said essentially he and Nazanin are sitting at home watching history repeat itself, and they feel that the UK government hasn't learned any lessons from their family's experience. You'll remember Nazanin served her 5-year sentence, and it was only when she was given another sentence by the Iranian regime that the UK government stepped in to secure her release. And, you know, Richard Ratcliffe can say a lot more than Joe, Lindsay's son. Joe Bennett can say, and indeed what Lindsay and Craig themselves can say, because they're in a very precarious situation. They're incarcerated in Iran and don't want to sort of jeopardise any chance of release they may have. But Richard Ratcliffe saying to me that, you know, essentially there is a refusal from the UK government to call them hostages, to say that they are innocent. And he said he and Nazanin experienced the same thing, saying that, you know, this is an innocent family literally walking in the same shoes that we walked in. He said how many families need to go through this experience before the government will say Iran takes hostages. So Richard Ratcliffe able to go a lot further than the Foremans would like to be able to go in, you know, talking about their incarceration, their unjust incarceration, and why they feel the UK government needs to do more. Craig ending on that stark and simple question. Sir Keir Starmer, what are you doing? Because essentially to the Foremans and to their family, it doesn't feel like they're doing anything.
OK, it's a really interesting interview and a very tough time for both of them. Sarah Jane, thank you.
Thank you.
Israel has expanded its invasion of southern Lebanon, and 3 UN peacekeepers have been killed in the last 24 hours. A warning, this report from Alex Crawford includes images of severely injured children.
Yet more ambulances are bombed to bits in South Lebanon. And there are fears that more Israeli strikes will follow, so they move quickly. This is daily life for first responders in Lebanon right now. The Israeli military is bombing emergency crews and their vehicles relentlessly, claiming without providing evidence that ambulances are being used to transfer weapons and Hezbollah militants are disguised as medics. No paramedic feels safe right now, and yet never have the emergency crews been more vital. Multiple groups, including some of the world's best known, have been attacked. Yet they all categorically deny providing anything but humanitarian help, and many are subjected to repeated bombings.
When you have airstrikes and you have to respond, and perhaps you'll get another airstrike. So you will wait, you don't wait, you have to respond, you have to help, you have to save lives. This is very risky. So it becomes more dangerous and more serious, but we have to continue. We have to give hope to the people who need us.
The situation's becoming more and more dangerous for UN troops working in the devastated south too. When we were last with them, they told us then of coming under fire. It's got a whole lot worse. They've come under attack twice within the last 24 hours. 3 peacekeepers have been killed in separate incidents and several critically wounded. UN troops are protected under international law, and the UN chief has urged all to ensure their safety. But those pleas and his condemnations are having little impact. Israeli forces are pounding the capital as well as the south, ratcheting up bombings after the Israeli Prime Minister said he wants a bigger chunk of Lebanese land for what he's calling Israel's security buffer zone to protect against Hezbollah rocket fire. But the Lebanese casualties are rising by the day. These are the Ali al-Jabal daughters with their mother Maya. 3 of them and their mother were critically wounded after an Israeli airstrike and are still in hospital. Zainab, the baby of the group, seen here in pink on the right, didn't survive. Their father, Hassan, was uninjured, but his whole world has been shattered. He spends his time in this clinic or in the hospital where his family lay fighting for their lives. These are the terrorists that Israel is killing, Hassan tells us, showing us Zainab as a toddler. They only found her body parts after the bombing, he says, and gave me them in a bag. His camera roll is filled with a litany of pictures which would break every father's heart. 12-year-old Fatima lost an eye, has shrapnel in her skull and a broken jaw and burns on both legs. Her older sister, Kalta, who's 14, is badly burned too and has broken limbs which will need multiple surgeries to help her walk again. She's going to be in hospital for about a year. His eldest daughter, Malik, is 16 and so seriously hurt he can't bring himself to take a picture. He tells us his wife, Maya, has terrible leg wounds as well as devastating skull injuries. One of his favourite pictures now is his wife with the daughter they've lost. Neither she nor his surviving daughters yet know that their little sister has been killed. When you see the house where they gathered for dinner with cousins, it's astonishing anyone came out alive. Hassan says the blast threw the children several metres away. They often had extended family gatherings. This was celebrating Fatima's birthday. And their youngest daughter, Zainab, was much loved by her older sisters and her proud father.
How can I forget her? How? If they give me all the money in the world, I won't be able to forget Zainab. All the money in the world won't be enough to replace just one of her nails.
His teenage nephew Abbas was also hurt. The Israeli target seems to have been his father, who worked with Hezbollah, but left the group last year when his salary stopped and became a sheep farmer. The attack came without warning. It killed one adult male, one child, and left 5 other children and a mother critically wounded. Alex Crawford, Sky News in Lebanon.
Alex Crawford reporting there. You're watching The World. Plenty more after this short break.
Mr. Hexton, does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve? Did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions.
David Cameron says that you should vote through funding for Ukraine. What do you say to that?
I really don't care what David Cameron has to say.
When you said you were from Sky News, I just got very excited. Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody?
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now. It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'll take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
So final preparations are underway for NASA's first crewed flight to the moon in more than 5 decades. Artemis 2 is expected to lift off on Wednesday from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Very exciting. Professor of Aerospace Engineering, Sinead O'Sullivan, joins me now in the studio. Great to see you. We've got a perfect picture of the world as well behind you. How good is that? So it's meant to launch on Wednesday. How likely is it? Because there have been quite a lot of delays, haven't there?
Well, there's been many years of delays, but we're hoping for Wednesday. Now, people are saying at the minute roughly 80% chance because of weather and other issues. I've heard 50% from some NASA insiders. Basically, there's a few different reasons as to why it may launch or not launch. Some of the delays that we saw last month. Now, just to rewind, last month, the rocket was on the launch pad. During a wet rehearsal, there were several issues around the propulsion systems. The liquid hydrogen and some helium was escaping. This is never good in a rocket that is going to launch with humans on it. So it was rolled back to the vehicle assembly building, and now we're going again for this time around. Should there be no propulsion issues, the next issue that could be problematic is the weather.
Right.
And there are many different types of weather. So you have surface weather, which is where the rocket actually is. You have kind of atmospheric weather, so getting from Florida to Earth, to low Earth orbit. And then, of course, you have in-space weather, which most people on Earth never think about. But only last night, I mean, talk about bad luck, there was a major solar flare, which is creating, kind of space weather impacts far above the Earth atmosphere that will kind of, interrupt communications and satellites and all that kind of stuff.
So you can't go if that is happening, clearly. I mean, this is quite difficult then for the crew, isn't it? Because they're desperate to go, but they're, keeping their fingers crossed like everybody else. What will they be going through at the moment?
Oh, well, I'm not an astronaut, but I can imagine that they are, the technical role means that they will right now be going through, checks and kind of all of the training that they've done over many years. Now, this is an extremely exciting flight for technical reasons and economic and geopolitical reasons, but also this crew are, 4 of the best astronauts that are in the astronaut corps at the minute. It's extremely exciting. Reed Wiseman, the commander, used to be the chief of the astronaut office. Two of the astronauts actually trained together in the same astronaut class. Then you have a Canadian astronaut as well. So 3 of the 4 are very, very well-seasoned test fighter pilots. One of them has been at NASA for many years before she was even an astronaut as an engineer. So these are extraordinarily well-trained astronauts, pilots, engineers. And so there isn't a better combination of 4 people to crew this mission.
Yeah, we are expecting an update at 10 o'clock. You can see a QR code there if you want to click on it. And just finally, why do we need to go back to the moon? It's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly dangerous. Why do we need to do it?
Yeah, you're right. It's not cheap and it is dangerous. I guess, one of the issues right now, or not issue, but, one of the targets of this mission, it's not the final destination to go to the moon. The final destination is to go to Mars. This is one step of many. So this is really exciting because once we are able to do Artemis 2 mission, we can go to Artemis 3, 4, 5. Once we kind of establish this presence on the lunar surface, we can then use this as a vital and much needed stepping stone to go to Mars. So for many people in the space industry, like myself, Mars is the ultimate goal. And this is a very important milestone that is going to enable us to get there.
Yeah, when we next see you, I'll ask you why we need to go to Mars, but I'm afraid we're out of time. Sinead, great to see you. We'll keep our fingers crossed for Wednesday.
Perfect,
Okay, Sinead O'Sullivan, Professor of Aerospace Engineering. And that's it from the world. Coming up next, it's The Wrap with Barbara Serra, as US President Donald Trump said today he wants a deal with Iran or he'll obliterate their oil wells and their power and desalination plants.